The sun had barely crested the jagged horizon of the Mediterranean when Lieutenant Marco Bellini adjusted his goggles and leaned forward in the cockpit of his aging Fiat CR.32. The air hung heavy with salt and anticipation, the stillness broken only by the distant hum of engines warming up on the airfield. Across the tarmac, a peculiar silhouette caught his eye, sleek, angular, and unlike anything he had seen before. The aircraft was a new fighter just introduced to the Italian Regia Aeronautica, already earning an unflattering nickname whispered among the ranks: the Flying Coffin. They called it the Flying Coffin in jest, but soon it ruled the Mediterranean skies. Bellini would later recall with a mix of disbelief and grudging respect. The phrase was born from a mixture of fear and skepticism. Its fragile frame and unfamiliar design struck many as a death trap rather than a harbinger of aerial dominance. Italian pilots scoffed at the notion that such a delicate craft could survive the brutal dogfights that defined the Mediterranean theater. Yet, it was precisely this aircraft that would soon rewrite the rules of air combat. In the early 1930s, Italy's airfields buzzed with the usual bravado and confidence typical of a nation eager to assert its aerial prowess. The Regia Aeronautica had long relied on sturdy, somewhat antiquated biplanes, their design reflecting a more conservative approach to aerial warfare. These machines were robust, heavily armored by the standards of the day, and their pilots were trained to engage in close-quarters dogfights with a combination of firepower and brute resilience. Into this environment came the new fighter, an aircraft unlike any that the Italian forces had previously encountered or developed. Its sleek monoplane design was a stark departure from the familiar curves of biplanes. The Italian engineers and pilots alike were quick to criticize its light frame, minimal armor, and the thinness of its wings. "It looks like a toy," grumbled Captain Lorenzo Ferrara during one of the early briefing sessions, his voice tinged with both skepticism and unease. "How can something so fragile hope to survive in the skies against our enemies?" This initial derision was not unfounded. The Flying Coffin, as it was mockingly dubbed, seemed to lack the traditional hallmarks of survivability. Its fuselage was lightweight, designed with speed and agility in mind rather than endurance. The armor was sparse, barely enough to shield the pilot from shrapnel, and its armament, at first glance, appeared insufficient to intimidate seasoned adversaries. The Italian command questioned whether this aircraft could ever fulfill its lofty promises, especially within the unforgiving Mediterranean airspace, notorious for sudden gusts and tactical complexities. But beneath its delicate exterior lay a marvel of Italian engineering, a machine crafted for a new era of aerial combat. The Flying Coffin was not merely a fragile bird. It was a calculated gamble on speed, maneuverability, and precision firepower. Its streamlined shape reduced drag, allowing it to reach speeds that outclassed many contemporaries. Its engine, though initially criticized for being underpowered, was a masterpiece of compact efficiency. Italian engineers had taken a bold leap, choosing to prioritize agility over brute force, a decision that confounded many traditionalists but hinted at a paradigm shift. Lieutenant Bellini's first encounter with the aircraft was emblematic of the wider Italian skepticism. Tasked with escorting a formation of bombers, he found himself face-to-face with the Flying Coffin for the first time during a routine patrol over the blue expanse of the Mediterranean. From his vantage point in the cockpit, he watched as the unfamiliar fighter danced effortlessly through the air, its sharp turns and sudden dives defying the known limits of Italian biplane maneuvers. "We mocked it as a death trap, a flimsy contraption that would never last a minute in combat," Bellini admitted years later. "But that day, I saw something different, a predator unlike any we had faced before." Despite their doubts, these early sightings soon gave way to cautious curiosity among the Italian pilots. Reports filtered back to command about the aircraft's remarkable ability to evade fire, its uncanny knack for positioning itself advantageously in combat, and its surprising endurance despite its seemingly delicate frame. The disconnect between the aircraft's outward appearance and its actual battlefield performance began to sow seeds of unease within the Italian ranks. The Italian military leadership, deeply rooted in traditional approaches, struggled to reconcile these reports with their preconceived notions. The Flying Coffin did not fit into the standard playbook. Its pilots did not rely on heavy armor or overwhelming firepower. Instead, they exploited speed, precision, and tactical cunning. This was a new breed of aerial warfare, one that demanded a rethinking of strategy and tactics. For the Italian commanders, the Mediterranean skies had long been a theater dominated by slow, methodical dogfights where endurance and firepower were king. The introduction of this new fighter challenged that orthodoxy. It was a disruptive force, one that did not merely survive but seemed to thrive in the very conditions that had previously favored Italian biplanes. The skepticism that greeted the flying coffin was as much a reflection of Italy's entrenched military culture as it was an assessment of the aircraft itself. As the summer of the 1930s unfolded, the flying coffin began to make sporadic appearances over key Mediterranean airfields and coastal patrol routes. Italian pilots watched with a mix of fascination and trepidation as it performed maneuvers that seemed to mock gravity itself. Tight turns, rapid climbs, and sudden dives that left most adversaries struggling to keep pace. Its presence was an unsettling reminder that the age of slower, heavily armored fighters was waning. Among the Italian ranks, whispers circulated that perhaps the flying coffin was less a death trap and more a harbinger of a new era. Some younger pilots, unburdened by tradition, began to study its flight patterns and speculate on its design philosophy. "It's like nothing we've ever seen," mused Second Lieutenant Johnny Rossetti during a debrief after a training exercise. "Fast, nimble, and deadly, if we could only figure out how to counter it." Yet, despite these observations, official Italian doctrine remained slow to adapt. The aircraft's true capabilities were still underestimated, and many dismissed the reports as exaggerations, the product of overactive imaginations or enemy propaganda. To many within the Regia Aeronautica, the flying coffin was little more than a curiosity, a fleeting concern that would soon fade beneath the weight of Italian firepower and experience. But the Mediterranean skies had other plans. The early 1930s were a period of uneasy calm, a prelude to the storm of aerial warfare to come. It was in this crucible of doubt and anticipation that the flying coffin would begin its transformation from a subject of ridicule to an instrument of dominance. Its pilots, initially viewed as reckless daredevils, would soon demonstrate a mastery of the skies that challenged all assumptions. In these early days, the Italian pilots' skepticism was a shield against the unknown, a way to dismiss what they could not yet understand. Yet, as the aircraft continued to defy expectations, that shield began to crack. The flying coffin was no longer just a fragile shape against the blue. It was becoming a symbol of a shifting balance of power in the Mediterranean theater. Lieutenant Bellini's observation post that morning was more than a casual glance. It was the first glimpse of a revolution in air combat. The flying coffin soared with a confidence that belied its nickname, its silhouette cutting through the sky like a dagger aimed at the heart of Italian complacency. What began as mockery was on the cusp of becoming fear, a fear born not from superstition, but from the cold, hard realization that a new master was rising in the Mediterranean skies.